Hello, I'm Mark Pugach. Hope you're enjoying my crazy ride through the Ashes series of 86-87 on Series 2 of Inside the Tour from Audi. I was working in bars, heading out after, and probably before if I'm honest, and would have loved an offer like the one we've got for you thanks to our friends at Beer 52. They're offering a free case of 8 craft beers to enjoy while listening to this series. All you need to do is visit www.beer52.com/inside and cover the postage of £5.95. Beer 52 is the world's largest beer club. Each month, members are sent a case with a different theme. Might be from California, might be New Zealand, who knows? You get a magazine and snacks as well, and if you don't like dark beer, you can choose the light option, and you can pause or cancel at any time. To claim your free case, all you need to do is go to beer52.com/inside, pay the postage of £5.95 and enjoy the taste of craft beer with the sound of extraordinary cricket and off-field shenanigans. You know the drill. It's Inside the Tour. Time's up for the Australian cricket team. Beaten home by England with a test match to spare, the Ashes lost again. As the inquest begins, an astonishing event occurs further east in Melbourne. 5 kilometres along the tram tracks at Kooyong Lawn Tennis Club, the contrast with a downcast MCG couldn't be greater. Australia's men's tennis players are about to win the Davis Cup. It's remarkable on many levels. The Aussie hero will be 21-year-old Pat Cash, who at school was a cricketer, inspired by the greats of the 1970s. And the 3 days of the final against Sweden take place on the only 3 days of the Boxing Day Test match. Both events in the same city, one watching the other. The tennis team, heroes and honourable Australians. The cricket team, failures and flops. Worthy of a prime ministerial put-down.
Bob Hawke was a cricket nut, and he came out after Australia had lost in 3 days, smashed in 3 days by an innings by England, whilst down the road Pat Cash and co are holding up the Davis Cup. And the quote goes something like, "I wish Allan Border had 11 Pat Cashes at his disposal," or something like that, which AB wasn't very happy about at all.
That's journalist Adam Collins. This is AB, Allan Border. His team had been thrashed by an innings. Ugly stuff.
I think the game lasted, about 2.5 days. I can remember us sitting around the dressing room, kicking cans and not feeling too happy about ourselves, our performance, quite rightly so. But of course, things start to loosen up as you have a few beers, and the two teams eventually get together after England have been celebrating next door, so we could hear it loud and clear. But we were watching the tennis, the Davis Cup tennis was on.
The most famous tradition is the MCG Boxing Day test. So, it was going to be on at the same time. All the focus was honed in on the cricket and the Davis Cup final.
Pat Cash was playing for Australia against, I think it was Michael Pernfors from Sweden. So, classic Davis Cup, the number one singles guys, going at it. And, it gives us some solace as, watching Cashy.
Pat Cash, 1986, the summer of 1986, we were playing Sweden in the Davis Cup final.
I think Cashy goes 2 sets down. There's a lot of, bad day at the office for the Aussie boys, that sort of talk. And as it turns out, Cashy wins in a thriller, a 5-set thriller, and we're sort of taking something out of the day that, he's come back and won this Davis Cup for Australia.
Neil Fraser, a very experienced Davis Cup captain and obviously former Grand Slam champion, would often talk about Bob Hawke, who was their Prime Minister, of course, then. They were very good mates from back, many years ago, 30 years. And Bob Hawke was a mad cricket man. And so it was quite often the phone calls would come in. That was before mobile phones, but in the dressing room or in the hotel room or whatever, there'd be a phrase would just say, "Oh, that was Bob Hawke," and go, "Really, the Prime Minister?" Yeah. He just wants to know what's going on. So in between his parliamentary duties, he'd be calling Fraser for an update on the sporting, which would be racing would be priority. Cricket followed by tennis.
And Hawkey is at Kooyong to present the Davis Cup to the Aussie team. And in his speech, his words to the effect was, "It's a pity there wasn't 11 Pat Cashes at the MCG today." So you can imagine there was lots of different articles thrown at the TV and lots of rumblings and carry on. But the bottom line was he's right. That performance against England, that particular game, was just as low as it gets.
Australia was in shock. So many live by the baggy green cap, the pride of the national cricket team.
It was a time for reflection.
Well, the reaction when you lose the Ashes.
Hi, Jeff Lawson here, Australian Test cricketer.
A pall comes over the country.
Australia had now gone 14 Test matches without a victory. It was an all-time historical low on that measure.
How do we lose that and whose fault was it?
To be 2-0 down with one to go, to lose inside 3 days at Melbourne.
To lose in Melbourne, Boxing Day Test is a fairly disagreeable thing for Australians and Australian cricketers.
You could say that Australian cricket was at truly its lowest ebb of the decade on that day at Melbourne.
The day was the 28th of December. The MCG would be empty and embarrassed for the rest of the scheduled Test match. Allan Border, ashamed, but determined.
There was a group of us in the manager's room, sort of up at the Hilton where we stayed in Melbourne that night. There was about half a dozen guys. There was me, Jonesy, Booney, Steve Waugh, might have been Jeff Marsh. A few of the sort of core group of guys that we had, and we sort of it was one of those line in the sand moments. We're not going to play like that anymore. That's it.
The group are tired, broken, beaten. It's before midnight, but it feels so much later. Beer in hand, the inquest begins.
I suppose good in a way that we weren't too sure where the bottom was, because we'd had a couple of years of not playing well, and who knows where you finally bottom out. And as history's shown, I think it's that particular day at the MCG.
To see us sort of dropping behind was a national disaster. I mean, it can only be called it really was a national disaster, sporting disaster. And you got to remember that we didn't have many sporting champions yet. And we didn't have many sporting TV networks and channels to watch sport. So there was cricket, it was Aussie rules during the year. Greg Norman was a star. Tennis was always big. So there was very few things to hang your hat on. And certainly cricket at that stage was pretty disappointing. I was always a cricket player. I was fascinated by cricket. I used to play a lot at school level. I did a bit of both, bat a bit, bowl a bit. I was the school cricket captain. I was only under 12s and whatever it was, under 13s. But if you were the first one to get to school, you could get the cricket nets. So you could get the cricket bat and the ball out and the pads out, and you could spend an hour in the cricket nets before school started. So I think that's why I got the captaincy, because I was always the first one to get there. And it was a good bit of fun. So I really enjoyed my cricket. Well, I mean, for me, growing up, Thompson and Lilly were our absolute heroes. There's nothing better than watching Dennis Lilly tear in, Jeff Thompson bowling at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It was always very exciting. My dad would be roaring out. The cricket testing was always on the TV. And you hear my dad roaring, he'd race in to see if it was a wicket or whatever. And it was quite often, he said, "Check, look at this. Thompson did a bouncer, and it bounced 10 yards over the top of Marsh's head and went over for 4 byes." And my goodness. I had a connection with Allan Border, actually. I remember very clearly having a dinner with 2 tennis players, me and my doubles partner, John Fitzgerald, and there was Allan Border and Ian Chappell. There's quite a bit of ribbing going on between what was the best sport and what the talent requirements were for tennis versus cricket and vice versa.
There's tennis and cricket. It's amazing how often we sort of gathered together, because the Australian Open was traditionally played at the same time as the Melbourne Test match. So you'd be at the Hilton at night and you'd see all the tennis players. In those days, they were allowed to have a few beers, as were we. So you sort of had a good fraternity between the cricketers and the tennis players. So it sort of started way back. And in those days, it was great fun over that Christmas New Year period.
There's no fun in the cricket camp this Christmas. Australia are at rock bottom.
It was, the usual doom and gloom story. Obviously, we'd lost to New Zealand the year before. Now we've lost to England at home. I mean, this is the worst side that's ever played. Mind you, they called us that in '89 when we got there as well. But to players, you always try to justify how you've played. And certainly we would look at the loss of all those players to the Rebel Tour. If you take that many quality players away, other players then have to learn their job. We had some good players, but they just weren't very experienced. There are reasons why you lose test matches. So players tend to look at, try to be a bit forensic about why you lose because you want to get better, whereas the press will tend to be quite emotional about it and blame personalities of people and look for fault. Whereas as a player, you've got to then front up to the next test, the next series.
Which was already on the mind of the skipper. Allan Border was not planning to walk away.
I was trying to find percentage points, right? So I sort of looked at my captaincy and what I did and didn't do as a captain and as a leader as well, on and off the field, away from the field. I mean, we were on the receiving end for the previous couple of years, against basically all comers, not just England. Tiny little percentage points of change from my own captaincy and how I went about it.
One, he was still our best batsman, but two, there were just no other candidates for captaincy because a lot of those candidates had gone to the Rebel Tour and weren't available to play for Australia. So, I mean, when you look at how AB got the captaincy in '84 and Kim Hughes stepped down, even AB wasn't in the succession planning to be captain of Australia. He was there to be one of the best players, but he just wasn't considered to be the captain. It's not a thought that anybody had that we would need another captain of Australia. I don't think he would have been too fussed if he had lost the job because it meant he would have concentrated on his batting even more and been even better. But the captaincy and Allan Border's grit and determination went together. So I don't think he was ever really in danger of losing the job. It was just, get a bit grumpier and, try a bit harder.
Down the tram tracks at Kooyong, Pat Cash was fighting hard to rescue Australian pride. Harder than expected.
They leave the field and there's still a set to go at Kooyong. So all the Australian players are trying to catch up on what's going on and seeing whether Pat Cash can finish the job in 5 sets after dropping the first 2.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. Yeah, I vaguely remember somebody saying that. That was the match was all gone. And at that stage, the summer of sport, it had really been a complete disappointment and it would have been a massive disappointment had of Cash not beaten this unknown guy called Pernfors in the Davis Cup final at home at Kooyong. Things were looking pretty bleak for Australian sport, I suppose, somewhere about 2 sets to love and break points down.
As it was reported at the time, a number of the England family, wives and girlfriends who were out there, they were so certain that it would go into a 4th day at the MCG, they went to Kooyong instead. They wanted to be at the tennis to see what would happen on the final day of the Davis Cup.
No way. I had no idea about that. Well, there you go. I mean, that's cricket, isn't it? Cricket's bizarre, one of those bizarre sports. So when you get on a roll and everything can go for or against you. Oh, that's bizarre. No, I didn't know that. As athletes, as players, we know that sport comes and goes. You have your ups and downs, and you have your bad moments and your good moments. And tennis was having a good moment, and the cricket was having a bad moment.
So time for drinks. In Australia, the 12th man's walking out, carrying a tray of something, while I'm getting properly refreshed with a fantastic craft beer sent in the free case from Beer 52, available in our special offer to all Inside the Tour listeners. To claim your case from the world's largest beer club, just visit www.beer52.com/inside and cover the postage of £5.95. Each case has a theme. If you don't like dark beers, just choose the light option. You get a magazine, you get snacks, and you can cancel or pause at any time you like. Right, the players are eyeing up my beer. 12th man off the pitch. Time to resume play. It's the start of the rebuild, and Allan Border has underlined how important that is.
It was one of those line-in-the-sand moments, we're not going to play like that anymore. That's it.
They then go to the World Cup, and Allan Border gets Mike Gatting out reverse sweeping when it looks like England are going to win.
I remind Michael Gatting of that every time I see him. He sort of tries to avoid me now. He almost tries to cross the street. He's never going to escape that one.
The MCG is clearly the nadir of where the Australian team were. 9 months later, they win the World Cup. They then go to England for the '89 Ashes. And it's the press saying that the Australian team is the worst team that's ever travelled, and they're a load of rubbish. But they win the first test at Headingley, and suddenly the Australians are off and running. Suddenly Allan Border is a confident captain. His fast bowlers are backing him up. And then suddenly you see this generation coming through. McGrath, Warne, Steve Waugh, who becomes captain. Mark Taylor becomes captain. Ponting, Langer, Hayden, all these massive behemoths of Australian cricket. So we go from the absolute lowest of the low from the MCG, 9 months later winning the World Cup, 89 that win the Ashes, and suddenly it's Australia who, when it comes to the England-Ashes rivalry, are absolutely dominant for the best part of 2 decades.
I don't suppose it's ever going to be possible to quantify how important 86-87 was to what came next with the World Cup and the win in 89 and the period of sustained success. I'm Adam Collins, cricket writer and broadcaster. Certainly from Allan Border's perspective, he's always talked about those dark times in the mid-80s when he didn't have a full complement of players to select from, when he was dealt a hand as captain that was far from what it could have otherwise been, that did mean that he never let an opportunity go. It was so influential in determining the way he would lead that Australian team and never accept second prize and be so ruthless and so unforgiving.
Yeah, well, certainly if you want to put a marker down as how the series turned around, I mean, yeah, that's it, 86-87.
Jeff Lawson here.
You know, and AB was the captain, when did he finish up? 94? So he was captain for a lot more years after that particular series, in which Australia were very successful.
Jeff Lawson, Craig McDermott, Merv Hughes, Bruce Reid are all important in future series wins against England. In Reid's case, only 1990-91, but he did take 12 wickets at the MCG, that same venue, the next time England were there in 1990. Then all overseen by Allan Border.
I've got to give a lot of credit to Bob Simpson, who was our new coach at the time, one of those old school professional cricketers, just didn't take any nonsense, the sergeant major type. So there was a lot of discipline that really came into the side that had sort of gone a little bit, and he was very good in that area. So it allowed me to do my thing and just be my the best I could be as the captain leader. But all those the practice sessions and the relentless drive that he had for fielding perfection and just doing all the little things well, it just really helped. It sounds strange, at that level, when you're playing for Australia, those things would come naturally to you. But sometimes, you just lose sight of the core little things. And we actually introduced some tactics, where we'd like to be after 15 overs, when we bat first, blah, blah, blah. So we sort of had some structure to our game plan, which we'd never had before.
If you're really going to analyse the 86-87 series, the result was 2-1. At the end of that losing Ashes summer, Australia won the World Cup. So that's a pretty big thing. And Australia won a pretty tense final against the side that had beaten them in the Ashes.
Oh, it was just huge because we weren't favoured at all. The home teams were the favoured sides, Pakistan, India, and then of course you had the West Indies and England in particular. They were a good side at the time. We were still very much coming out of a 2-3 year hiatus of not performing, chopping and changing our team around and just trying to work out this core group.
The Australian players, Boone, Dean Jones and Steve Waugh, they just got more and more experience. And that was with, Craig McDermott, Simon O'Donnell, Greg Dyer was the keeper who played one test in 86-87. So they all got better because of that loss at home, and that's what you got to do. That's all you can do. You try to get better. I think AB became a better captain and a better leader in a bit of adversity, and the younger players started to perform. So wouldn't underestimate that victory. Okay, winning the World Cup's a great thing, but to beat England in that final after being beaten in the Ashes was quite significant.
World Cup won, attention turned to reclaiming the Ashes. When Australia toured England in 1989, they weren't given much of a chance. But this time, they were ready.
Australia were able to turn the corner in 87 when it came to their contest against England. They wouldn't lose another Ashes series for 18 years through until 2005. And once they get to 1989...
I suppose I was surprised by the final scoreline.
Border's side win the series 4-0.
England were a very good side. We weren't fancied. It was one of those, you turn up to the worst Ashes side ever type headlines. So because we had a very young group together, and England weren't particularly worried about Steve Waugh or David Boone or Jeff, or a couple of those guys, but Terry Alderman probably should have brought back some memories. I knew he was in the ranks and bowling well, and if there was ever a guy that's born to bowl in England, it's Terry Alderman. So he was there. Jeff Lawson, very cerebral, fast bowling groups, particularly those two that you could bounce things off, and they were great to work with. I mean, it wasn't all just me. These guys had some sort of game plans, how they're going to bowl at Gower, how they're going to bowl at Gooch, etc. Had certain fields that we thought might work. But you still got to deliver, haven't you?
And deliver they most certainly did. Border mentions Steve Waugh. The future Aussie skipper was 24 during that series, but back in '86 he was a rookie at 21, an all-rounder in those days, and remarkably playing as the third seamer in the Adelaide Test.
When Steve Waugh was captain of Australia, he used to often talk about his initiation to Test cricket and how embarrassing it was losing at the MCG in 3 days and being part of that team and realising that you could never give an opportunity for a team to get on top of you the way that England did Australia in the summer of '86, '87.
Yeah, look, I think with Stephen, he always had early signs. He had early signs when he started his career, in 84 for New South Wales. It seemed to be a bit of a anomaly that he hadn't got a Test 100 because he'd been made 50s, he'd made a number of 70s actually, and then would find a way just to nick a straight ball or get out. He was also had the burden, and I say burden of his bowling because we only picked two seamers when we get to the third Test, we only picked two seamers, and Stephen had to do all the other bowling. So he was playing as the genuine all-rounder, not the player he became after 89 when he was just a batsman who bowled very rarely. He was the genuine all-rounder who was asked to do a fair bit of hack work with the ball, and that can detract from your batting, particularly playing very long innings. If you've had a day in the field, you've had to bowl 10, 12, 15 overs, and then you've got to go and find a place to bat. It does take a bit out of you physically and psychologically.
Australia were growing into the all-conquering team they would become. Under Waugh's leadership between 1997 and 2004, they won the World Cup again and dominated the other Test nations. Preceded by Mark Taylor and succeeded by Ricky Ponting, Waugh was there during the highs, but also the lowest of lows. It truly was a remarkable period in Australian cricket history, as remarkable as multiple mentions on a cricket podcast for the Swedish tennis player Mikael Pernfors. But he almost compounded Australia's misery on that famous festive weekend in 1986.
Everything was going according to plan. We'd beaten Edberg.
Fortunately, Pat Cash was on hand.
Okay, McNamee lost, but Fitzgerald and I came out there and we played a great doubles match. So 2-1 up, I don't need to do anything crazy to beat this Pernfors guy. He's a clay courter after all, isn't he? So I'll just go out there and play half-decent tennis. Half-decent tennis was not nearly good enough, and Pernfors absolutely destroyed me for 2 sets. I've got to say, I've never had anybody play like that against me. I just couldn't believe it. I've never seen anybody play like this in my life. Like in the Davis Cup final, it was a 5-set match, as we know. I was barely hanging in on my serve in the third set, got the sort of 2-all and got to 3-all, just. Fraze came up to me and the change of hands and he goes, you know what, Pernfors is slowing down. He often says it's the biggest white lie he's ever told in his life. And I was like, really? You think so? He goes, yeah, absolutely. You didn't get to that shot. He got to that shot in the first 2 sets. And I said, and we're like, yeah, I think you're right. He didn't get you. He got to that in the first 2 sets, didn't he? And he said, yeah, you've got him. If you just hang in there, he's going to run out of gas. He's going to run out of gas. And I did. I just hung in there to somehow get the 3rd set. And again, same thing happened. Just hung in there, got the 4th set and ran away and started playing great tennis in the 5th set and won.
It's a pity there wasn't 11 Pat Cashes at the MCG today.
Yeah, I heard that and I thought, oh, that must sting a little bit. I felt sorry for the guys in the cricket, I got to be honest. That's really tough. That's really tough on the cricketers. It's amazing how much that highlights how important the cricket is. It was great that we beat Sweden, but what would happen to the cricket? We needed a Pat Cashes out there, so let's get back to the cricket. That's how big the cricket was.
The good news for Australia is that things do pick up in the final test of the 86-87 series. And it's all thanks to a man we need to find.
I actually haven't heard him talk about it.
Right, we'll find him. Don't worry.
Oh, a very, very close friend of mine, yeah.
I mean, you know him a bit. Where is Peter Taylor these days?
He's a champion bloke, PT.
He's the one who asked for a loan, by the way.
Do you have any idea? Where do we start looking?
So he's up. Is he still up by New South Wales in a farm in the border? Yeah.
Hello.
Inside the Tour, The Ashes is presented by Mark Pugach, original music and sound design by Lee Sperry, additional music Dan Compton, produced by Jonathan Overend at 9419 for Audi.